Hey guys, welcome back. This is History of Futurama, Season 2, Episode 14 of my show, which is also going to be about Episode 14. Now, Episode 14 in the second season of Futurama is known as How Hermes Requisitioned His Groove Back. Now, before I get talking about it, I just want to mention two things about the title. This episode focuses on Hermes' sort of connection to being like a bureaucrat and stuff, and and bureaucrats make requisitions. I think that's the reason behind why when the creators, when they created this show, they had an episode that focused on Hermes being a bureaucrat, that they focused on naming the title that, like, requisitioned his groove back and everything. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Basically, the way this, now getting into the storyline of the actual episode, the way this episode starts off is Hermes is basically, working in his office, doing some stamps, and then when he gets to the final form, he's like, "There, the final form of the day. Welcome to Stampy Town. Population 5. So he stamps it 5 times. And then basically that's when he gets this note from the central bureaucracy, and he sees it. He says one of his weird jargony type words. I can't really remember which one it is, but I can't really remember which one it is. But he says that he said it's a note from the central bureaucracy, and then the note is just a reminder from the central bureaucracy reminding him that he's about to receive a letter from the central bureaucracy, and then when he receives it, he realizes that he's got an inspection coming up. So he basically tidies up his office, and then leaves for a little bit, and then after he leaves, what happens is the office comes back being a mess because of the fact of what happens with I think with one of the other members of the crew, and then when he leaves, first they're wondering what's happening with him. He says he's going home for the day to prepare for tomorrow, to prepare for later when the inspector comes for the central bureaucracy for the inspection. And but before I continue, since we're on episode 14, that means I'm just gonna get off topic here 1 minute. But since we're on episode 14, that means we've got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, so 7. We got about 6 more videos left before we finish this season. And guys, I just wanted to get that out of the way before I got back into the storyline of the episode. Anyway, now getting back into the storyline, what happens is after he comes back and he sees his office as a mess, he freaks out about that and mentions that he will never get his office cleaned up in time before the inspector comes. And then Leela and Fry are telling him that he can get it cleaned up. But then Hermes says, like, it's too late. The inspector will be here in 1 second. And then the inspector does show up, and the inspector is another bureaucrat member known as Morgan Proctor, bureaucrat, grade 19. And then Hermes says that he's bureaucrat grade 36, and then basically they exchange forms for to be stamped for the inspection, and then basically Fry's wondering how Hermes can get his office fixed now that the inspector is here, and then Hermes is like, don't worry, I got a plan. And then his plan is basically he decides to jump off the roof of the building because he's like, I'm gonna jump! And then when they see him up there and stuff, what happens is first he says he's not a very good bureaucrat, so he's not a very good bureaucrat, so he's gonna splatter his pavement with his body and stuff, and then the crew is sort of telling him not to do it, except for Bender. He's actually encouraging him to do it, and one of the people that's encouraging Hermes not to jump is the professor, because he's like, please friend, don't jump! Use another... And this is the funny part. The funny part of it is, the reason why he tells him not to jump is because if he jumps, he'll damage his liver, and because he's like, please friend, do not jump. Use another method that won't damage your liver. Other people... And the reason why he doesn't need it damaged is because he says that other people need it too, which I think in this case means him, because he's an old man, his liver's not working right, so that's why he needs it, and he doesn't want Hermes to damage it by jumping. Anyway, and that's when Hermes' wife La Barbara shows up and tries to encourage him not to jump, but he tells her that basically he wasn't cut out to be a bureaucrat anyway. He's only right a certain amount of half a percentage of the time, and that's not enough. And then Morgan Proctor tells him, who's the inspector in this episode, he's like, Bureaucrat Conrad, if you attempt to commit suicide without signing a certain violent death citation, like a form citation, he will be illegally demoted. And then Hermes gets upset about that, and he's like, life, death, either way, I'm demoted to a tiny cubicle. And then he's back living again because he doesn't jump, because either way, like he said, he's demoted to a tiny cubicle. And then basically, Morgan Proctor temporarily takes over for Hermes after she makes a suggestion that he takes a rest for a while, and then in order to get back to work, which makes sense because he did try to suicide himself before he stopped, so he's in no condition mentally and emotionally to be back at work. So she's basically suggesting that he take some time off, and then that's when Zoidberg mentions that he recommends the health care on the planet Spa 5. And then when LeVar hears about that, she wonders if it's any good. And then Zoidberg's like, oh, he says that it's wonderful, and this is the funny thing, the funny thing about it is, he doesn't actually know what Spa 5 really is. It's not a spa-based planet. Now, what I mean by that is it's a forced labor camp, but Zoidberg doesn't know that because he's an idiotic lobster. And the reason why he doesn't know is because they didn't tell him, and because they didn't tell him what it really was, and the only reason he makes the recommendation for them is actually because they give him the people of that planet give him a bucket of krill for every patient that he sends over there. So basically, in a sense, he's oh my god, I'm sorry, but basically, in a sense, he's finding a fourth life for Kevin without even knowing it, and he doesn't care because they give him a bucket of krill. And then basically, Morgan explains that while Hermes is away, someone's gonna have to take over. She's gonna have to assign someone to take over as the bureaucrat while Hermes is away, and then she nominates herself, and she says that herself accepts, and then in the next scene, what happens is Morgan changes Hermes' bureaucrat thing to hers so that they know that she's in charge, and then she basically does a rundown of the crew's performance, and then basically when she brings up last week's delivery, she mentions why it took them so long to complete it, and then Leela says that the reason why it took so long for them to complete the delivery last week was because Fry got his head stuck in a crater. Oh my god! And she had to pull his head out of it, and oh my god! I'm sorry. That's just hilarious. She had to pull his head out of the crater, so that's why the delivery took long. And then after that, Morgan inquires as to what Bender was doing during this period of head crater interaction, and Bender says that he was basically, and this is the funny part, because he says he was in a martini, he was having a martini drinking contest with the autopilot for the ship. He would have had him in time, but they ran out of olives. And then when Leela tries to explain that why they ran out, Morgan is explaining, you really expect me to believe, you really expect me to have you explain why you left port without a whole bunch of olives for the drinking contest and stuff, and then basically she says that she doesn't, and then Morgan says that she doesn't think so, and then after she goes to inspect the crew's basically where their lockers and stuff, and then basically when she sees Leela's jacket, she asks her, why is the jacket not in alphabetical order? The zipper should be at the bottom. Because she mentions about why the jacket's not in alphabetical order, and then Leela wonders what she means by that, and then she said that the zipper should be at the bottom, which is true, because if no one is wearing the jacket, then you don't need to have the zipper at the top, you need to have it at the bottom, so, same thing with the sweater sort of thing. Anyway, and then she opens Fry's locker, and then basically she sees that it's a mess, and then after she sees the milk in a hat, she wonders what's happened to it, and then basically Fry tries to explain, but then Morgan has Bender and Leela leave so she can speak to him alone, and Fry thinks that he's in trouble, so he said that, wait, this is the other Fry's locker, I'm the Fry with the PH, and then she basically tells him that he's a mom, and then she basically starts to get all in love with him because he's Slav, and then basically Fry mentions that what's going on, because he thought she was anti-dirty and not pro-dirty. And then she explains that the reason why is because she's surrounded by neat freaks and stuff. By neat freaks and people who keep things clean every day, and they're easier than a filthy slop sack like him. And then he gets admired by that, and then basically afterward, she tries to downplay that her having an affair, and then by saying that no one must know, and if they even ask, she'll deny it, and then Fry's like, just like every other girl I've ever dated. And then basically what happens after that is, then what happens is then it goes back into a scene where Hermes is on spot 5 and this woman is basically having them seemingly do spa stuff, but it's not actually spa stuff, it's labor for the forced labor camp. And then when LaBarbara finds out that it's not a spa, it's when she sees that they're being used as slaves and stuff, she's like, this isn't a spa, it's a forced labor camp. And then basically Hermes gets annoyed by that, and he said that, curse that Dr. Zoidberg. If I ever get out of here, he'll be looking out the other end of a shrimp fork. And basically the guy that's an Aussie there is talking with him as well, and he says that, give him one for me too, mate. I don't know why I go to him. And then the forced labor camp worker basically uses a laser to get them moving again because he doesn't hear the thing moving and stuff. And then basically they're having a meeting to discuss what's gonna happen with the crew from now on. And then basically what Leela's title as captain has been basically demoted, and the one who's going to be in charge to drive the ship now is the autopilot. And then when Leela hears about that, she gets upset about that, and then basically Bender starts laughing about that, and he's like, but he stops laughing after Morgan gives him his new job, which is basically putting him in charge of the professor's bodily functions, like taking him to the bathroom and cleaning the wax out of his ears and stuff. And then basically, oh, and since I mentioned the thing with the ear wax, I should mention that's actually gonna play into the thing to how Bender's gonna find out about Fry and Morgan's little secret. I'm sorry. That's just, I had to laugh because that's kind of hilarious in a sense. Anyway, then she basically tells Fry that she's promoting him to executive delivery boy. He won't go on any deliveries, and he'll have his own office next to hers. And then he gets happy about that. And then the rest of the, and then he tries to give Bender a high five, but Bender doesn't want to. But then basically Morgan is telling him that he has to, and then in order to move the meeting along, and then after that there's the rebound, and then she mentions about the rebound, and then he kicks him instead of giving him a rebound high five. And then basically what happens is after that Fry is in his executive delivery boy office close to where Morgan is, and then basically Amy wonders why Morgan's being so nice to Fry to give him a promotion and stuff like that, and stuff. And then after that, when they see Bender come in, and he's got all this dirt on him and stuff, and then Leela wonders what happened to him, and then Bender explains that Morgan made him, like he's like, Morgan made me walk the professor. There we were walking through the park when some old lady said I stole her purse. I chucked the professor at her, but she just kept coming. So I with this purse I found. No, about that, because the reason why the lady attacked him was in the story was because he said she thinks that he stole her purse, which it was true because he was using it to whack her. And then he said that the point is it's all Morgan's fault, and he said that she's a pencil push. He starts insulting her and says that she's a pencil pushing kid. Like, and then Leela tried to shush her because basically what happens is, this episode does one of the weirdest things about talking about someone behind her back. Because when Bender hears Leela shush him, and then he's like, "Oh, is she behind me?" Because the typical trope about that is when you're talking smack about someone, they're always behind you when you talk about them, but Morgan says that no, she's in front of him, and then he sees that, and then basically, he gets startled by it and stuff, and then basically what happens after that is, then it goes back into the scene where Hermes is on Spa 5, which is the forced labor camp disguised as a spa planet, and he sees that the cards going full. When he sees the state of the cards when they're pushing it, he's like, "Look at that! The cards go in full, but they come out empty." Well, actually, the part with Hermes doesn't actually come into effect until, if I'm remembering correctly, that doesn't come into effect until afterward. What happens is, then it goes into a scene where, Fry is in his room, which is in Bender's closet, which is in Bender's apartment, and then basically what happens is, he wakes up because Morgan answers the phone, and then basically, answers the door, and then he tells her that it's late in the evening, and she says that she knows, but a skunk knocked over her garbage, and because of what the skunk did, she could think of nothing but fine, and basically, he shows him what he shows her where he basically eats and sleeps, and then after they get on the bed, Fry is trying to warn her about Bender being his roommate, and he could be back any second, but then Morgan explains that that's not likely, because he ordered him to flush out the professor's earwax. You know what earwax is? It's the little clumpy stuff that builds up in the ears and stuff. And they do that, and they basically start having sex, and that's when Bender shows up, and he tells Fry that he made Fry a candle with the professor's earwax, and then he sees them having sex, and then he starts to figure it out, because he's like, now it's starting to make sense. The office, the promotion. So I'm thinking, and then Morgan starts to leave, and then Fry tries to explain to her that he's stuck in a loop, and then he said, another case closed, my dear Watson. Basically, in the next scene, Morgan is trying to explain to Bender that it's a misunderstanding. And then when Bender hears that, he's like, oh, you didn't understand? Well, let me explain. you was having sex with you, and then basically Morgan says that uh actually now that's not what she meant. The thing she meant was a bureaucrat of her rank isn't supposed to fraternize, and then when Bender hears that, he's like, that's what makes it so juicy. It's a forbidden fruit angle everybody loves. And then Bender is like, he's like, they'll ask, you'll never guess who. And then I'll say, I'll tell them, you'll never guess who saw Brian while you're doing it. And then they'll be like, who, Bender, who? And he's like, he slowly starts to say it was lovable old Bender. But as he's about to say the last word of his sentence, his voice slows down because Morgan takes out his processing thing that allows him to have his memories and his interface and his in-your-face interface, and his memories, his remarks, his in-your-face interface, and then she takes out his brain essentially and makes him not talk like an actual robot, but it makes him not act like an individual robot, but it makes him act like a normal bending unit robot. And he's like, I am, and when he's in that form where he's being a normal bending unit, he's like, I am Bender, please insert girder. And then basically after that, she puts Bender's brain into a file, and then Fry says that Bender needs his brain for smart making, and then basically she puts it in. Then Morgan puts it into a capsule, and then Fry wonders what he's done with it, and then he asked him to stop doing things, and then basically she said that she filed it away she sent it away to be filed at the central bureaucracy, and that she did what she had to do because Bender was a bad robot, and then Fry says that's not the case, he was just a bad friend and he wants it back. But she says that basically he should have filed a request 20 years ago, and then he's like, I'm sick of you and your bureaucracy, and he throws some papers on the floor, which basically makes her kinky with him again. And then basically in the next scene what happens is that's when Leela and the others find out that Fry and Morgan were having an affair, and then Fry explains that he couldn't help it. She loved him for the part of him that was a Slav, and he loved her for the part of him that was desperate. And then Bender starts saying, I am Bender, please insert girder, and then they realize that he's acting like a helpful robot and stuff, and they realize that in order to get his memories back, they have to go to the central bureaucracy. And then when the professor tells them that, he said that he tells them that they can't waltz over to the central bureaucracy. It's a maze of red tape and legal productions, and then he says that he's never been, but a friend of his went totally mad trying to find the restrooms there, and then Leela says that they need to find a guide, someone who's been there before, and then the professor says that he's been there before lots of times, which is because he's in denial, because he's an old person, so he forgets that he said that he hadn't been, and then they basically, now I'm gonna get back into it with Hermes here. He and LaBarbara are still at the forced labor camp, and then they're pushing these carts that are filled with rocks, and then when he sees one of the carts empty after it comes out, he's like, look at that! The carts go in full, but come out empty! it's criminally inefficient. And then the guy in the Aussie in the cowboy hat character is like telling him to be quiet because basically all in the empty cards is the closest that they get to sleep. And then he mentions that they couldn't, but then Hermes mentions that they could improve efficiency 4% if they use the empty cards to haul away heavy mining machinery. And then one of the slave labor workers said that he likes how Hermes thinks, and he tells them that he should be a bureaucrat or something. And then basically, after that, what happens is he starts to get happy about that, and then it goes into the scene where they're back at the central bureaucracy and they're waiting to get in. But after a little while of waiting, they decide to go in by pretending they have to make a delivery for a bending unit robot. And then when the bending unit says, which is Bender says, I am Bender, please insert girder. The guard that's there is like, looks like we've got a new office cut up. And then basically what happens, which is essentially in this case is making a joke as to they got a new office worker that makes a joke. And then basically he lets them in, and then they go to find out where those tubes go, and they find this man that's driving the snowmobile, and then he said that he's gonna crash his snowmobile because he had to swerve to avoid them. And then Leela asks him while he's crashing, could he tell them where those canisters end up? And then he says that they want central filing, and then they go on to it and to where one of the other bureaucrats is, and then the bureaucrat that's there tells them that of course he knows where that is. He's a grade 20, where the central filing is. He's a grade 20, and then Leela asks him if he could tell them where it is, and he said like, I can't tell you. What do I look like, a grade 16? And then after that second when Leela gets annoyed and decides to track where the central filing building is by using her wrist flow jackometer, which is a tracking device that is on her wrist comm thing. And then basically it says cold, warmer, and then it says like hot, 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 and then they try to follow the trail to where it is, and then they come upon this one-eyed thing called the Beholder who's asleep, and after they bump into it, his eyes open, and then he causes more of those tubes to show up, and then after they leave, he's like, please don't tell my supervisor I was sleeping. And then after that, they manage to find the central filing building, which after they find it, Morgan finds them, and basically, essentially, Fry breaks up with her by saying that she's an evil, heartless woman, and he never wants to see her again. However, will she help them get Bender's brain back for old time's sake? And then she said that his brain is somewhere in the master in pile, and it would take a very good bureaucrat in order to sort it. And then and it could take a long time to sort it. And then basically, that's when Hermes shows up, and then the professor gets annoyed by Hermes showing up again, and he's like, damn it, Hermes, just jump already. Stop hogging that healthy liver. And then basically Hermes says that he wants to live because reorganizing that forced labor camp reignited his love of bureaucracy. And then basically what happens is LaBarbera explains that Hermes got the labor camp working so efficiently that all the manual labor is done by a single Australian man. And then basically that's when this old man in a chopper-like desk shows up, and he's known as number 1.0, and he's like, requisition as to why the people are meeting up at such a point in time. And then basically Morgan gets shocked by seeing number 1.0, and then after that, Hermes basically makes a recommendation to number 1.0 for an emergency sort and file under certain regulations. And number 1.0 is like, don't quote me, regulations. I co-chaired the book. The color of the book that the regulation was written on. We just kept it gray. And then basically Hermes explains that he has to find the file with his friend's brain in it. And then basically the number 1.0 basically agrees, but he tells them that his very well, but your bureaucratic license will be revoked once, if you don't sort through the master in file by closing time, which is 1 p.m. And then basically after that, what happens is Leela says that that's only 30 minutes from now, and then basically Hermes says for them to requisition him a beat, basically number 1.0 basically plays the music for Hermes to sort through and stuff, and then while they're singing the song, this is the funny part of the song to me. What happens is, when it gets into the later parts of the song, basically what happens is, when it gets to the segment of with Zoidberg, Leela, and Bender and the Professor, Zoidberg in the song is like, they said I probably shouldn't be a surgeon. They fooled my electric frankfurter. They said I probably shouldn't fly with just one eye. And then Leela's like, and then Bender's like, I am Bender, please insert girder. And then after he turns the tube for the sort and file stuff into where it needs to get sorted, and then basically they're singing the song again, and then basically he's saying that in the song that the world looks down on them bureaucrats. Oh, before I continue, when he started the song, he mentioned about how he became a bureaucrat, which happened because of a storm that caused his alphabet blocks to be knocked out of order and stuff. And then I just wanted to backtrack to that part of the song since I didn't really miss it, but I skipped over it, but I thought I'd backtrack to it. And then afterwards, he's telling them to everyone to say Jamaica, and then he said just the bureaucrats now, and then the bureaucrats say it, and then the grade 9 which is Morgan, and she gets annoyed with that, but she says it anyway. And then basically he's saying that the world looks down on in the song he's saying that the world looks down on the bureaucrats because they're because they say they're anal compulsive and weird. But when push comes to shove, you gotta do what you love, even if it's not a good idea. And then they managed to finally find Bender's brain, and then inserting it into him. And then he's like, he kind of repeats what he says when he was unintelligent and helpful. He's like, just the beginning segment of it, because he's like, I am Bender, baby, please insert. And instead of the girder thing, he replaces it with the word liquor. And then what happens is, they're congratulating Hermes for getting the job done. And then number 1.0 is saying, congratulations indeed, but you finished with 10 seconds to spare, so I'm demoting you. A good bureaucrat never finishes early. So he basically keeps his job, but because of him finishing earlier than he was supposed to, he gets demoted, which essentially means he keeps his job, but his rank is down. And then Amy mentions that basically that's okay because at least they have him back. But then Morgan reminds them that she's still in the acting bureaucrat for Planet Express, and she had some changes to make, and she says that the first thing is Fry's fired. And before she mentions the second thing, Hermes is like, not so fast. While I was sorting and filing, I came upon a second document filed by one Morgan Proctor. Form B, notification of romantic entanglement. And then when Fry hears that, he said that that's right because she fraternized him, but Morgan explains that form isn't about him. It refers to her high school prom date, which in her mind was a regulation date, which ended in regulation disappointment. But then Hermes mentions that that's true, but she only stamped it 4 times, and then he puts the form down, and everyone's shocked that, and then Morgan gets upset like that, and she's like, no, I was young and reckless. And then number 1.0 tells Hermes that, bureaucrat Conrad, you are technically correct, the best kind of correct. And after he tells them that, he basically promotes Hermes to grade 37, and then basically and then number 1.0 looks at Morgan, and he's like, and as for you, guards! And then he basically tells the guards to bring him the files he needs to have forms he needs to have filled out to have her taken away. And then basically after the professor mentioned to bring his number 1 bureaucrat back at severely reduced pay, everyone else wonders about the severely reduced pay thing, and if they can come back. And then basically, well, because Fry mentions it, and then Hermes says that yes, in fact, severely reduced pay all around, and then basically he leaves with Elvira on a snowmobile, and then that's basically where this episode stops. So if you guys like this video when I post it, just please give this video the real best you guys can, and I will see you guys probably sometime next week for the next Futurama video. But until then, guys, like I always, just please give this video the real best you guys can, and like I always tell you with this series, fun on a bun.